for our first Firestarter CEO series. We'd like to thank Andrew for stepping up to be our first CEO to kickstart the event, and also thank Dri for moderating, who's no stranger to being a health tech CEO himself. So now I hand over to Dri.
Thank you. Let me just turn this on. Very good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So this is the first in a new series of conversations that we're calling the Firestarter Chats. You will notice it's not fireside chats. It's an itch I wanted to scratch for a long time because I always thought it was odd to have fireside chats in the tropics. So we took our inspiration from the humble Dhamma. Have you seen this? In Singapore, in the tropics, when you want to start a charcoal fire, that's the kindling that we use. And you will notice our little carpet here is also after the Dhamma, the Firestarter. The Firestarter, it's not just to be clever. There's, obviously some intent to all this. We want to light some fires within you. We want to get you guys thinking. And to do that, we're going to get people around, like Andrew today, top founders, scientists, investors, to talk about their experience so that we can learn a thing or two, get some inspiration. Hopefully this hastens your own, journey along this path. We also have an ulterior motive because, as you know, there are more scientific innovations coming up universities, then there are people prepared to run the spin-outs. So with your permission, if you give us your name, we would like to be able to send training information. This Friday, we're actually going to launch our Deep Tech Talent Central. It's going to be a marketplace to help individuals like yourselves find training if you feel you need training, and also employment. We're looking for a new generation of CEOs and leaders for a new generation of biotech spin-outs coming out of our research institutes. I don't need to tell you, entrepreneurship is a very challenging path. I've also spent some time as CEO of a medical device company. I was at one of the largest tech transfer offices in Singapore. I can understand the reservations many of you have about leaving the safe harbor of academia. So today we're going to help you address some of these concerns, and we are very privileged to have Andrew Bruce with us. Andrew is currently the CEO of Medisix Therapeutics, but he started his career at GlaxoSmithKline. Is that more or less correct?
More or less, yeah.
And then went on to a US biotech called Chiron, which was acquired by Novartis. And then after that, had numerous positions in a variety of consulting and outsourced partner arrangements. I'll let you
more or less
talk more about that. So you'll see his take. It's a very interesting path. That he's acquired a lot of experience before becoming CEO of Medisix. So without further ado, first of all, a warm round of applause. Andrew, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I was slightly worried there might be coals I had to walk across.
Sorry?
I was slightly concerned there may be coals I have to walk across barefooted in this Firestarter.
Not today.
Okay, maybe the end.
Okay, so tell us, Andrew, what was your bachelor's in?
So I did a bachelor's in, it's called medical sciences, but essentially immunology and medical microbiology.
Okay.
Before the TCR was discovered in 1984. And then which is at University of Bradford in the UK. And then I joined industry as a sales representative, actually, for a family company at that time called GD Sill, which was ultimately acquired by Pfizer.
Was that something you knew you wanted to do, or it just?
No, I've never really known what I wanted to do, to be honest. I think, that's part of my journey has been opportunistically seeing something I thought that might be quite interesting to have a go at. So I mean, the story about how I decided to go into medical sales was I I was in the GP at the university and saw the business card of the medical representative from Wellcome. I thought, medical representative, what, that sounds quite interesting. You might get paid quite well to do that. And so I picked up the business card and contacted the medical rep.
Without the GP knowing?
I think I may have said, could I take the details of the medical rep? And said, would you mind meeting me for lunch and explaining to me what the role of a medical rep is about? And so that's what we did. And then I went out with him for a morning. So I watched him selling to doctors and thought this is something I would quite like to have a go at. And then, so I horrified my supervisor because she wanted me to do a PhD. Said I'm going to go to the dark side and join industry. And then progress through various roles at Searle, and then, as you mentioned, at Glaxo. And as things have come up, I've sort of thought, well, that might be quite interesting to have a go at and to learn more about different aspects of the way the industry works or the company works or the way product is got to patients.
But at this stage, all sales, right? You just kind of moved up the sales.
So I started as a sales rep. I then went into training.
Okay.
Then I went into management of sales reps, and then I went into marketing.
Okay, so that's a first switch.
Yeah.
From because that's a significantly different functionality.
Yes. So I went into product management, which is really, the side of the equation that is really about the different aspects of what you need to do to bring a product commercially, from getting it made, getting it registered, pricing it, thinking about how to promote it. There are the 5 Ps of being a product manager.
Which are?
Googleable. Pricing, promotion, place.
Okay.
And so that was interesting. And I got into new product marketing through that. And then I moved to Glaxo. But interestingly, I moved to Glaxo. Well, I found it interesting to do a new product marketing role. When they interviewed me, they said, we've got this other role that we would like you to take on, which is to run a couple of the sales teams to launch some new products. So why not? So, I went back into sales and then went into various operational roles, including supply chain, logistics. And
okay, so that's also very different.
Very different. And what you realize when you look at the supply chain is decisions that are made in manufacturing can compromise the ability to make product available in the market. So things that are saving money in manufacturing are costing significantly more for the marketing company. So for example, we had 50p bottles. I don't know if anybody's seen Beckinase or Flixinase. So it's a little brown bottle. They make it twice a year, and if you just buy the amount that you think you need and then sell more than you thought you were going to sell, you end up not being able to fulfill the demand. And in the US, a 50p bottle sells for about $50. So the decision making that's made in the supply chain really has a profound effect of being able to make sure patients get access to the medicines. And so that was quite an interesting journey to learn how marketing forecasts, how that sort of impacts the ability for companies to supply product, and also how you forecast clinical trial supplies. And that took me then into a whole new area around development for medical affairs and ultimately bringing products through out of discovery and into development and making commercial decisions around that.
And this was all in the span of from when you started as a rep through marketing,
16 years,
back to sales teams,
84 to 90.
clinical trials.
Yeah. And then in 90,
sorry,
from 84 to 90, I did that.
Okay.
And then 84 to 2000, and then I went into corporate development in biotech. So I started in a small biotech company called Venalis, which is in oncology. Then I moved to Chiron, which you mentioned, which was huge, and that was one of the first wave of real biotechs.
So that's a big step.
That was
From
all
big
about
pharma to
to a small company.
Yeah. How
Well-
small are we? What are we talking about? Just founded? You founded it?
No,
or-
no, it was a company that had been founded and then reinvented itself 2 or 3 times. So I came in on the second reinvention and worked toward the third reinvention, and it's still reinventing itself some 20 years later. It's not been the most successful biotech
But
company.
I think for the audience, it'd be interesting to understand your thought process.
Um,
You were making a good amount of money at GSK.
yeah,
and
I mean,
So when you went to the startup, how much less were you making?
I made more
How did
doing
they-
that. I made
how
more
did-
going to the startup because they rewarded risk.
Okay, so it was a combination of
But really,
cash and shares.
yeah, but money wasn't really the driver. I would say money is, if you do good work and you enjoy doing work, you tend to find that money sort of finds its way to you. What I liked about going to a startup was it was at the exact opposite end of the spectrum to being in a big pharma where resources are pretty much limitless. The pipeline that's coming out of the research organization is profound and really the biggest challenge is being able to allocate resources. When you go to a small startup and the goal is to really think about how we did corporate development and business development to fund the company, manage the risks associated with the pipeline, think about what it would take to get to a value inflection point so that we could move the share price. I mean, those are all sort of intellectually quite challenging things to get involved with, and you're so much closer to the decision making that makes a difference when you're in a small company. So you're a little cog in a big series of cogs when you're in GSK, and you can see some effect. But when you go and there's 4 of you in the corporate team, and you very clearly are tasked with doing a deal with Roche to make sure that there's non-dilutive funding coming in for a research program, or you're looking to out-license, and you're close to the CEO. So that was the first time I really was close to the guy who was responsible to the investors and to the this was a public company at that time, and saw some of the pressures, some of the challenges that he faced.
What did your wife have to say about this? So
She's quite, forgiving. That I think when you have an attitude of being comfortable to take some risk, and that, there's no real downside. You're getting experience that's transferable. I think, that's, if you have this view that risk is if you fail, then it's a problem, then I think you kind of limit your ability to be successful. If you accept that some things won't work, and to be honest, at Vinalis it didn't work. We did a series of corporate initiatives that just didn't happen. The share price tanked, but then I got the opportunity to move to Chiron, and I took that experience and that learning and was able to get the benefit of that when I moved to a much larger but still a biotech company with the same challenges. No, I did all of this in Europe. Yeah.
So then you stayed in Chiron.
I stayed in Chiron. I worked in Europe, but I reported into the West Coast, and my job there was essentially to do intellectual property deals. So Chiron had a whole suite of IP in blood testing, vaccines, and pharma. And what they wanted was somebody in Europe to work with European companies and to cross-trade intellectual property. So we bought a vaccines company, we nearly bought an HIV company, we did a lot of cross-trading of intellectual property. And again, that was a different series of challenges. I reported to the CFO for that role, and 2 weeks out of 6 I was in San Francisco, and it was exhausting.
And then after Chiron, you took the first steps into doing, again, something different. And this time
Completely
this was
different,
in
yeah.
consulting.
Correct.
Was the outsourcing company?
No,
did
so
that
the
come
first
or
step I made was I decided that I had enough of commuting to the West Coast and that I could do with spending some time with my family at home. And so I decided to just set up a kind of one-man band consulting specifically around medical affairs, actually. And then I built a network of collaborators that we kind of brokered work for each other. And then a friend of mine that I worked with, in my very first company, contacted me and said, I've got this idea about outsourcing medical science liaisons. We think there's an opportunity in Europe that's untapped. What do you think? And so we had a look at that. So I did this consulting work on my own for a couple of years, and then he came along. And then, well, it was called TARDIS Medical. So I had TARDIS Consulting, then we made it TARDIS Medical, which is more broad. We offered outsourced medical science liaisons and then different medical affairs roles and different clinical roles. We had a consulting practice and we had a training practice. And we grew that with no investors, from nothing to a £25 million business that we sold to Publicis in 2015. And then, so that was back into, Publicis is a huge top 4 media company. So that was moving back into a big, huge organization. So the idea was to sort of transition the company and integrate into this huge company and then retire. Just before then, Publicis decided they wanted to get rid of it. So we then took it private. We bundled it up with some other businesses. We took that private. I then extricated the businesses from Publicis, which is more difficult than integrating. And then I retired.
Okay. We spoke about this a few days ago. This was the company you built from 3 to 300.
Yeah.
And because you were providing services to a number of companies, you also had the opportunity to interact with a variety of leaders.
Yeah.
Right?
So we were providing services to
very interesting things to say about that.
Yeah. So we were essentially providing outsourced solutions predominantly to startups entering into Europe. So we're working with the senior leadership, the CEOs and the heads of medical predominantly, and so got exposed to different styles of leadership from a CEOs who are really the scientific founders, to CEOs who had been brought in once the scientific founder really had gone beyond their capability. And one of the observations I had, and one of the best CEOs I ever met, was a guy who we were on his third company, and he said, I get the company to this size because I'm good at that, but I'm not very good when we're taking products into development. So I exceed at that point, and we bring in a CEO who's got the right experience to progress the company, and really to think about the limitation of his experience and what he was good at, and then being able to ensure that his lack of capability didn't inhibit the organization in terms of where he could take it.
But was that level of self-awareness common?
No, I think most of the leaders that we worked with held on to the dream that they had at the beginning, and found it very difficult to let go of that dream. And even at the times when you think you move out of the scientific arena and then into clinical development, very few scientists know about clinical development and regulatory affairs. And it's that point, I think that's where Dario, our scientific founder, has been quite smart. He sort of ignites the company. He stays with the science, but the leadership that we now have in the company really is suitable for the point in the evolution of the company. But I don't think, well, my perspective would be this leadership would take it so far, and then maybe you think about, well, what is the real skill set you need to, like if we go to an IPO, that's not my skill set. So I wouldn't see myself being in that sort of space.
If you're an investor, though, what would you do? Do we train the scientist entrepreneur, or do we just replace him?
It's a tricky question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things I would really give some credit to Dario is he.
So Dario is the scientific
Dario
founder
Campana,
of Medisix. He's
whereas,
Professor Dario Campana at US.
Yeah, and we're his third company, and he hasn't been operationally involved, but he's close enough to navigating and sort of marshalling the science so that we don't lose sight of the vision he had for the company, the vision for the science, and that my job as the CEO is really to bridge that vision that he has with what the investors are looking for. So I don't think it's an equation of replacement, or I think it's how do you kind of get the right role for the chief scientist, and bring in a CEO who can influence both parties. The investors have a perspective, and it may not be 100% aligned to the founder, and it may not be 100% aligned with what the science is telling you that you can do. And I think one of the skills that a good CEO has is being able to sort of navigate this sort of complexity, knowing that really we're responsible to the investors as the number one party, we're responsible to the people in the company as number two, but we're also trying to steer the company as close to the vision that the founder had at the outset as possible, and be really clear and not afraid to confront, and I don't mean that in a sort of aggressive way, but don't avoid the fact that there are these differences of opinion, and get people around the table to discuss them, and for management to have an opinion that is sensible for the direction the company can go in.
I mean, you are painfully aware, building a team around. I mean, you're one of the rare seasoned veterans of the industry.
You don't get grey hair like this,
right,
by accident.
I think for many of us who had worked in the universities, it's either the professor himself, and that's fraught with danger, or we try to get graduate students to do it. How viable is it to try to select graduate students or young postdocs to be the leadership of an early startup? Is it meaningful? I mean, is it possible, or do you think it's a complete waste of time because they just don't have enough experience?
I think there's a self-selecting process. So there's definitely a cohort of A-star, for want of an example of scientists that come out of A-star that see the entrepreneurial opportunity, are prepared to take a bit of a risk, or that they see that the risk is only as bad as what would come after it. If the company doesn't succeed, then you just take the experience that you've got from that and move forward with it. And I'm fortunate, I think one of the things that I recognize, well, it's very straightforward. I have no clue what they're talking about most of the time in the scientific meetings. So you have to surround yourself with really good people, and they have to be credibly able to work with the founder of the company, who is preeminent in our case in his field. But they self-select. It took a long time to find the right people to put into those roles, because you need this mix of kind of visceral entrepreneurship and risk-taking, but the smarts of being able to see the possibilities of the science, buy into the vision, and be part of the ownership of the vision to be able to drive that forward. So I think it can be done. I'm fortunate that the leadership we have are open to growth, and one of my jobs is to really get things out of their way so that they can grow, and culturally they can own, rather than sort of post-box issues. They can own and learn from their own approaches, that they feel confident to make mistakes and rectify them, rather than worry that if they make a mistake then there's going to be some kind of comeback or problem. So I think my role is to enable them to grow.
What would you rank as the three most important traits, or in your young team, that would encourage you to entrust them as a potential successor? If you had to name three, what would it be?
Certainly. So we want people to be accountable. Right, so that means that they can drive their own agenda, make sure it's aligned with the company, but that accountability is really important. I want them to be empowered, so I want them to take decisions, at the closest point to the battle, rather than navigate up. And it's okay to take decisions, and maybe they're not the best decisions, or they're not perfect, but the mindset of learning and sort of being able to be self-aware and be confident enough in themselves to learn and defend the decision making, I think is important. And I want people to have fun. So if you can do all these things, you can be an expert, you can, there's some ground points around the roles that people have. But to me, being accountable, empowered, and enabled to do the very best work and have some fun doing it, I think, those are the things that I look for.
So we were having this discussion earlier. These traits, are you born with them, or can you learn them?
I think there are many leadership programs, and I Googled leadership and I looked at the various things before I came. And I think the smart people will recognize in themselves the things that they do naturally and are consciously competent. And then there are things that they'll recognize that they don't do very well and that they'll want to attend to. I think the really great leaders have an additional component, which I think is harder to learn, which is the notion of charismatic leadership. So I think if I think of a charismatic leader, I think of Barack Obama, right? So there's
in the biotech world, who would you count as a charismatic leader?
Well, I don't know if the previous GSK CEO was a guy called Andrew Whitty.
Andrew Whitty?
And he was here in Singapore. I think he led GSK here. He was on the
Singapore
EDB
for a number of years,
board. I think he has that charisma, which is more than just the skill of leadership. Something about the fact that there's an authenticity, there's a likability. He makes you feel like you're the only person in the room when he's talking to you, and that he's not going to be distracted, and that he cares, and he has a real vision and a real belief in what needs to be achieved. And somehow that charismatic component, I think, distinguishes greatness. And I think that's harder to learn. But maybe it comes through confidence as well. So, you have to expose yourself to various types of roles that enable you to grow as a leader, and then feel self-confident around that.
So in Singapore, one of the the opportunity cost here is very different, right? You finish your PhD, there's an opportunity to work for Shell or Glaxo, versus starting a company. It's not a whole lot of money. You have a wife and a young kid. In the US, if things turn turtle, you can move to Montana, buy an acre for $1, raise animals, grow vegetables, and you'd be fine. In Singapore, there's no escape. How might we overcome that? Because I think that continues to be, that inhibits a sense of adventure, because the downside is quite brutal. How do you deal with your staff? I mean, how do you incentivize them or assure them and provide that sense of security?
Well, I think there's a few different layers to that question. So one is about security. And it's interesting, when we've recruited folks, that if there are two things on their mind, one is the salary and the benefits, and the other is security, they're probably not talking to the right company. Because by definition, if you come into a startup, you have to accept there's an element of risk. What I see in our company, and since I arrived, we had 8 people when I first started. We've now got 30 people here in Singapore, and it's been a slow process of finding the right people. But they have been motivated by the science, about being able to make a difference, to working with Professor Campana, and to feel that the resources that we'll make available are entirely down to their control and their ability to influence a vision and a sort of scientific excitement around what we can achieve as a company. And I think part of that is that we've created a really good vision for what we're planning to create as a company. Part of it is the culture which we built around the values that so I spent 2 months interviewing every member of the team to understand their values, what was interested to them, to collate values that were corporate values that reflected everybody in the company. So everybody that comes to work, I don't want anybody to leave any of themselves at the front door when they come into work. I want everything, warts and all, good and bad. I want them to be motivated by the fact that the values that we have in the company reflect not all of their values, but all the values that we have, they resonate with them. And so that when they come in, we talk about integrity, it resonates with them. We talk about trust, empowerment, all of these things. And we defined 7, and they are things that we recruit against, we reward for, and we actually fire against, actually. Well, we have once. Because I think if you're asking people to take a risk, the kind of risk that you're talking about, then the return has to be on the desire, the enjoyment, the pleasure, professional and otherwise, to come to work every day, graft, because it's a lot harder graft, I think, and a lot more pressure to deliver than there might be in some of the other institutions. But we reward people not just financially, but by enabling them to be the very best they can be, invest in their training. And we're just about to have a program where we're taking one of our senior RAs and putting him on a secondment to do a PhD as part of his development. So it's a quid pro quo. Some people enjoy that. Some people are motivated to do it, and others, that's not for them. And then go, if you want to play safe, go and work for Glaxo, but be ready, because they'll be laying people off probably more easily than we will be. I think that's a big change to 2005-06, when jobs were plenty, and now you do see Wuxi, others that are investing in here, but the skills they're looking for and the risk associated to that's probably no different to coming to Medi6.
You're right. Conventional employment as we know it has changed. Right? If you don't meet Wall Street expectations on your EPS, people get fired. Yeah.
And I think if you come to I don't know about any of the other Singapore biotech startups. I do know that there is a series of investors in our company who are driven to support us to make our company successful. And it's not a straight line, and there are challenges along the way. And all I say to the team is, do your very best work, deliver what we ask you to deliver. I'll worry about working with the investors to make sure that we've got certainty, or as much certainty as you can, for the future. But our goal is to really drive the value, not just to Medi6, but also to Singapore Inc. And I think, unlike anywhere else that I've worked, the investment community here has really tapped into this, whatever it is, 25-year plan of making biotech a successful space in Singapore. And so growing leaders, enabling them to take their time within Medi6 is a good thing, because because we're a small team, they get exposed to all sorts of things that they had no clue happens in bringing a product through development.
But equally, they must have a willingness to deal with the unknown.
I think they have a willingness to deal with it, and they enjoy some degree of learning, and they enjoy looking at problems and thinking, well, how do we move these challenges forward? And
well, on the basis of what you've seen, what's your prognosis, do you think?
In relation to Singapore?
In relation to the capacity to execute good science, top-level science, the talent that's available, and
the talent and the fundings. Well, so the talent in Singapore is second to none. I mean, I've been exposed to it in the US, where, to be honest, a lot of the biotech talent is a fallout from other biotechs that weren't successful, or from large pharma. The talent here that I've seen is outstanding, and the work ethic is second to none. The people that have been attracted to joining Medi6 can see that there's an opportunity for them to grow. And one of the goals that I have for our head of discovery is that her profile, not just within Singapore, but within the therapy area that we're involved in, her profile is international. We want to be the leading company with the leading science, and the leading scientist with a leader that has a profile that meets her expectation or opportunity. And so my job is to kind of enable that to happen as much as possible. So the more that we can help those that are in the institutions feel that this isn't really a big risk. In fact, the biggest risk is staying stuck rather than seeing, where there is an opportunity, and, if it doesn't work out, there'll be another opportunity. This nation is not short of opportunities in biotech. And that's the nature of the beast. And I think, those that embrace that will continue to be successful, even in a situation where, a project doesn't succeed or the science just doesn't come through.
Shall we ask the audience for
Yeah,
some questions?
happy to.
Do any of you have any questions? Yeah. So if the very fact that you're here suggests that you've contemplated becoming a CEO of sorts, which means you're no fly on the wall. So I expect many questions. Please get us started. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Ling, and I come from academic background. Just the one you mentioned about the young postdoc trying to set up here in Singapore. So in our case, it's
You're a postdoc where? Sorry.
In NUS.
In NUS. Okay.
Yeah. So the problem that I'm facing right now, because we kind of a scientific team and wanted to set up a company here, and we're really looking for some collaborators or partners with have some industry background so they can working together. So I have a question regarding what you be your recommended channels to know more about those partners, and then how do you judge when you see the people and then you feel like this is the guy that can fit in our team and bring our technology forward and then become more great?
I think that if I'm right, the first point is really just, if you're starting a company, how do you get access to people to help you to kind of know what to do to get the company going?
First, I think what would be the channels you think would be the best one to meet up those partners? Because usually we just kind of limit ourselves in the academic settings, so not a lot of opportunities to expose us to the industrial peoples. That's the first thing. Second is that once you get the peoples, how do you judge that this guy is the one that can work together with you?
So what I did is I stole somebody from A-Star who'd run collaborations and therefore had the network. I think you don't necessarily have to steal people, but if you find the people that have got those connections, either whether it's through a forum like this or others, I found recruiting actually quite challenging because the recruiters here are not used to recruiting in Singapore for relatively specialist roles or corporate roles. So and I did this at a time when there was COVID, so it was very difficult actually to meet people. And so there's just a lot of pinging people on LinkedIn, talking to people, asking, do you know such and such? I'm looking for this. What about that? I talked to our investors a lot. They tended to know the environment here much better, and they were very good at saying, I know such and such. It might be worth talking to them and seeing what they're like. And my sort of mindset is, when you find good people, even if it's not perfect for the role, it's better to get good people in and then craft the role around them than it is to try and. You'll never find the perfect person for the role that you think you've got. But if you find good people, you'll find a job that they can do and they'll deliver really well for you. So then you have to be comfortable about what it is you need, what's the chemistry, what's the personal connection or professional connection that you get. Because the people that came in and that have been successful, and I haven't had to change any of the leadership team, because we've been aligned around what we're trying to achieve together and the work that we're doing. And there's a good, it's not always harmonious. It's good to have some healthy tension in a leadership team, but one which is open to exploring that. And I think you just get a feel for that. And you occasionally make a mistake and you just have to own it and deal with it. There's no magic bullet, I don't think. I mean, I have been talking.
Sometimes it's more like based on the feelings and the chemistry you just mentioned.
Yeah. Because, when you're working with people in a challenging series of things that you're doing, if the chemistry works, you can forgive people for screwing up, basically. But I don't think anybody comes to work to make a mistake. So when you have good chemistry and good connection, then you're able to really solve the problems and deal with them confidently. If you don't have good chemistry, that's much harder, I find. And so I have a very large gut, in experience as well as everything else. And I, you get a good feel. You start to get a good feel fairly quickly when you meet people, whether they're going to be people that you can spend time with, and you're going to spend a large amount of your working day with these people, right? So you have to enjoy that as well. You have to enjoy the difficult things more than the good things.
But you will make mistakes. It's fine. Yeah. It will happen. So you just have to learn from it.
I think if you're not making mistakes, you're not taking good. If you're not making mistakes, you're not taking enough high-value risk because you're playing it probably too safe.
As far as networks are concerned, the fact that you're here means you're on our mailing list. Please keep, that's one of our roles, is to bring people together. I mean, we can have a chat now, but at the end of this, please stay on and engage with Andrew, with me and my team, for more events.
And I'm very happy to chat outside of this and bring as much as I can. One of the things that attracted me to coming to Singapore was really just being part of the ecosystem and learning from it and being part of helping to sort of support it in its development. And I think the more that we can do that, and I encourage my team as well to do that, the more they can do that and build their networks, and the more you can do that and build your networks, then we're not really competing. So we should be sharing, steal shamelessly and share as much as possible.
Any other questions?
Hi, thanks very much for the chat. I'm Trevor. Basically, I'm a physician that is working to specialize in infectious diseases, so that's just my background. Where I'm coming from is that, to be frank, coming as a clinician perspective, there are not many CEOs of biotech companies who are clinicians. And I guess off the top of my head, from the ones that I know locally, like Dr. Tan Min Han, CEO of Lucence, and Dr. Zhou from Merck's. But I think both of them have come from the academic route. And as I guess you may know, being a clinician takes a lot of time, postgraduate training and so on and so forth, long hours. So where I'd like to assess and ask is, do you see a clinician as an ideal fit for the role of a biotech CEO? And if so, at what stage should he or she venture out? Because, is clinical experience really necessary, or should he or she devote more time to the business aspect of things? Should he or she devote time to pursuing the academic and science frontier, which is similar to what Dr. Min Han did? And I guess Prof. Dario Campana also is another example of that, but I'm guessing it's coming, it seems, more from the scientific advisory board kind of view. So maybe if I could find out your thoughts about that, and if you could give any advice.
Well, it's interesting because, so what if you're a medic? You did 8 years or 10 years and you know how to cure people or treat people. But in that journey of being a medic, or in a journey of being a sales rep or medical devices, you pick up transferable skills, right? And if you think about leadership, some medics lead and some medics follow. I have no medical experience. I have no scientific experience. So the question is, if you want to be as a CEO, then what are you bringing that's above your medical knowledge? And then how do you surround yourself with the skills that you need to be successful? Because I think, and you can put me right if you disagree, but as a CEO, your job is really not to bring an awful lot of knowledge to the task. And it's not really about the skill that you've learned from the past. And it's more about how you enable people to deploy their skill. So you could be a medic, you could be a car mechanic. I don't think it matters that much what your background is. It's really how you bring the leadership style that enables others to be successful, and that you get the organization out of their way, and that you can speak eloquently to investors and enable them to come on the journey with what's required, and you know how to communicate and influence people way more than whether you're a medic or you know got some commercial background. And it's about, I think, more about the confidence that you can have in yourself to be a leader than it is about the sort of knowledge that you've got. The knowledge that you've got will be helpful, but it's not the difference about being a CEO or not. I think the CEO is much more about you being able to enable people, and you'll have seen good and bad in the period of time it's taken you to qualify as being a physician. There will be some value if you want to be leading a anti-infectives company, because there'll be a passion that you have and an authenticity about what you want to drive. But I think that's part of the DNA of being a good CEO. I think, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'm a clinician. I specialized in anesthesia. I left. At some point, ended up CEO of a medical device company. I think it's useful, but it's not sufficient. Yeah, I think there are greater predictors of whether you're going to be a good CEO or not. I mean, than the actual medical background. But I have to say, when you're raising money, the fact that you are an MD actually takes away. It helps. To cut a long story short, yeah, especially if you're in a biotech.
I think if you've got that knowledge and you can communicate that, then that adds an awful lot to the investor confidence. And so I don't have that, so I have to make sure that it's available through others in the company. I don't know if that helps or not, but I wouldn't worry about being a medic or not a medic. If you want to do it, just go out and have a go.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kun, and I'm a postdoc in A-Star IMCB. So I have two questions. So as a CEO, how would you, any tips on how to motivate your staff to join you in this risky venture, or to continue in this journey if the going gets tough? Okay, that's one. Second is, how would you effectively pitch to investors to invest in a venture that could take like a very long time horizon to mature?
Wow. Got any difficult ones? I think, so it's a really good question about motivating folks, because I think I feel that pressure most days is that my presence in the organization is one of enabling people to do the best work and to motivate them to feel confident in the way that the organization's progressing. And some days that's more clear than other days, you know, if you have a project that's struggling or what have you. And so I think motivation comes from really trying to understand the people that work in the business, and that's a lot easier when there's 30 people than when there's 300 people. And it's empowering people and making them feel comfortable that it's sometimes it's okay to feel, you know, that things aren't going well, and that you can't turn up and be smiling every day when things are going wrong. And you know, I find that, you know, we had a project that was struggling and that we decided to close it down, and we had the formal channel of doing that. But to be kind of, I don't know kind of the way of doing this, but just to kind of have a quiet word and a quiet chat, how you're feeling, show you care, show that it's not the end of the world, show that you're there to help them to get through it, and that you have something for them to do next. I think those things go a long way. And some people, you know, like that to happen publicly. Some people, you just want to have a quiet chat at the coffee machine. And I think you just have to get a sense of what's right for different individuals. We have a town hall every month, and every month I'm honest about what's going on in the company, and that's a problem sometimes, because if you're too honest, people get concerned. But I think if you're honest and you demonstrate and give confidence that you recognize that something's happening and you're doing something about it, and that everybody has a role to play, and that you're not some magician that can pull every rabbit out of the hat, but everybody can help to contribute to moving things, and recognize that, and recognize people for doing it. I think that helps to motivate them. Your question then was about how would you pitch to an investor? Well, I think of pitching as a two-way process. I'm more interested in what an investor can do for me and them demonstrating that to me as much as they might be interested in the science or what we're looking to do with the company. So we do have a story about the vision that we're developing and the journey that we're going on, and we demonstrate that. We demonstrate, all of the things that investors want to see about value inflection and value. The thing I think that makes a difference in a company is the management team. And so I ensure that for all board meetings, for all investor presentations, the management team are part of that process so that they get exposed, they can decide whether they like some of the investors, and frankly, some investors you think, I don't want to work with you and I don't want your money. And other investors you think, yeah, I really like you guys are going to bring a lot to the party, and we really want to show you not just what good the science will bring, but really what this management team can do and how confident you can be in that. And so I spend a good proportion of that discussion enabling my team to show to the investors that they are really good at what they do.
Strategic investors.
Yeah, it doesn't matter whether it's a pharma company as a strategic investor or as a financial investor. Anybody, I think they are buying the science and the management team to deliver on what we're planning to do. Oh, hi. Sorry, I didn't see you. But that's our goal: is to make sure that the team is exposed and investors are confident in the team as much as they are. If you, in some ways, they can be more confident in the team than they can in the science, because you don't really know always what the science is going to do for you. Does that answer your?
Maybe I would like to follow up on that point that you made on the investors or the VCs. I'm Katja Fink from Immunoscape. What has been your experience with the Singapore VC landscape, or with investors, maybe other type of investors, in terms of what they can bring to biotech, since it's a two-way?
Yeah, well, it is a two-way. So I meet all of our investors and their teams, whether they're US or Singapore, on a monthly basis. I normally have something that I want from them as much as what they might want in terms of information. They're great at connecting, and they're great at helping you to see some flaws in maybe some of the thinking. What I find here is they're very good at helping you to understand what is kind of acceptable or going to land well with investors, whether they're Singapore investors or elsewhere. Things to avoid as much as to head toward. We work with Clavist, and we're building a close relationship with them to help us think about what they can contribute and help us with around infrastructure, or around expertise, around business development, I'm very happy to find out what they can offer and take as much of it as possible, because generally it's free and it's in service of their investment as much as it is our benefit. But the downside of that is when you're doing something they don't like, you feel that pain as well, and you just have to be comfortable with that. And my job is to keep that pain away from the management team, because they don't need to worry about that dynamic. They need to worry about being able to do good work and getting on with it. Is that your experience?
Hi, I have a gut feeling I'm one of the rare few with a pure commercial background. So I'm also here with my co-founder. We are trying to start a biotech startup. So my question could be kind of awkward because my co-founder is sitting right beside me, but it is a question where, as a CEO, when you lead very intelligent people in their domain knowledge, what has been your experience and how do you navigate this? Because as a CEO, obviously, I would not have that domain knowledge, and I would rely on them as subject matter experts. of course, there are a lot of literature out there telling you how to manage very smart people. You can read leadership journals, management journals. But what has been your personal experience, and what are your tips to help to lead and manage people like this?
So everybody in our company is smarter than me, logarithmically. They're younger, they've been exposed to more current science. They're super smart people that have really been invested in Singapore. So I can completely relate to your point. I think I do two things. I ask stupid questions all the time, and occasionally one of the questions will land and it will spark something that takes us in the right direction. Or if I think that there's something that I'm not really sure that the science is kind of leading us a direction that's not really very commercially interesting or unnecessary, then I can use stupid questions to kind of try and navigate around that. And then I've been very honest with the three scientists that are on the leadership team, that they know that that's not my forte. I'm not afraid of that. I'm very happy for them to explain why, go through the basics, listen to them very carefully, ask stupid questions, and for us to kind of massage the right route. They're there because they're smart and they're good at what they do, and I cherish that, and I want to enable them to flourish in the role. And I think that I spend more of my time trying to work out what are the questions that will help to move things in the right direction. And just some blunt, non-scientific questions that they can play with.
But I would think that there will come a point where there will be opposing sides, like within scientist A or scientist B, and so as a non-subject matter expert, how do you manage this conflict, and how do you, without possibly alienating one of the sides, because you probably have to choose option A or option B supported by scientist A, scientist B. What do you do?
Well, so I have a very simple rule of thumb, which is time is our enemy. Cash is not, right? So when it comes to this point, then we just circle back to, is this improving the speed of which we will be able to progress or not? And they can debate. I don't mind them debate. They don't fall out, but I think you do get healthy tension, and I think that's not a bad thing. And things kind of work their way out. But I think you don't necessarily need to take sides. I think you just need to come back to the fundamental point of is this improving anything to do with us being able to get this into clinical trials quicker? I'm not so worried about money.
I see your point. I see his point. It's the CEO, and they're differing. And you need to make a decision upon that, right? But again, that's why you might have an SAB, Scientific Advisory Board, right? When you need help, get help.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm fortunate because Dario is involved, but he and I don't always see eye to eye because there is definitely a trade-off between academic interest and what's really in service of being able to hit our objectives. And at some point, you just have to take a decision and cross your fingers, and I try and get consensus, so I've not got to a point where we've had real conflict between scientists. I'm fortunate that the team work well together. They can see different points of view. The scientist who's the head of strategy probably brings in a sort of different perspective. But I'm very happy to spend time debating to get to a good answer, and that sometimes frustrates them because I think they want me to make the decision, because somehow that hierarchy of being the CEO is felt to be important. But I don't think I'm the best person in the room to make a decision. So I try and get the decision to be made by them, and most of the times that happens, and sometimes it's wrong, and sometimes, there's probably never a black or white answer, is there? There's just one way or another way. So try one way, and if it works, that's great. And if it doesn't work, go back and have another go, I think.
Are there any other CEOs in the audience who want to
Answer some questions.
chip in? Madam, yeah.
Hi, I'm Alison Fagan. I'm CEO of CF Foods Group, and we're working on cell-cultivated proteins.
Sorry, what's the name?
Alison Fagan, and it's CF Foods Group. So we've recently relocated our company from the US to Singapore, based on the government's very supportive ecosystem here. Andrew, thank you so much for your talk. It's been brilliant. I want to ask on a separate side. You've spoken about this ability to accept failure, and I'd love to know from your perspective if you were willing to share maybe something that you saw as a failure that became a great learning, and how you learned to pivot, or when you identify when it's the right time to let something go and pivot and upgrade your strategy.
Very happy to share, actually. And actually, it's not just accept, I think celebrate failure. So we're working on a range of applications of T-cell technologies for different projects. For various reasons, one of the projects just was not getting the data that we expected. And I think, constantly I was saying, should we just stop? Are we at the law of diminishing return now, or are we seeing the sciences, or for whatever reason, we should just take this team and put them onto something else? So my only regret is we took the decision a bit later than we should have done, but I think that was partly that the scientific team were keen to see whether they could solve the scientific problems that we had. But the important thing was to make the team feel comfortable that it was okay, that the science, it was nothing to do with the work that they had done. It was all down to the fact that the science, the hypotheses that we had were proving not to be, or we weren't doing the work to get the data that we'd hoped, and that it was better to take that team and put them onto a different project and pivot. And what we did was we carefully managed the 5 people, and actually they didn't just all wholesale when they got distributed to different projects. But how you manage that process is more important than anything, because you don't want people to feel that they failed. In fact, you want them to feel that we're happy that we've discovered that at this point, before we spend any more time or any more money or resources, and that it's a balance of just what is the window when you decide to stop doing something. And you don't want people to regret doing it too early. You don't want to be feeling the pain of doing it too late. And you just get into a judgment. You think, right, actually, I know that we've got something else that we could get more value from. And I think everybody pivoted. We recognized them publicly for the work that they'd done, and thought very carefully about the language we used, about how to describe the project. I think there's a sort of period of time where there's a bit of disturbance, but everybody at the end of the day could see. And what I want people in the company to do is to reflect on the fact that this is a good thing. That's what science is about. You're either trying to find a yes or a no, and the sooner you find no, the better. Does that answer your question? I sort of just went off on one there, but I think.
Okay, we'll take this question, and then
Wine?
Good news, we can break for a drink and food. Please. Yeah.
I'm Yang Kai from local CRO. I also have a medical background. Maybe later we can discuss more. My question is, from your experience, so what is the role of CEO for startup and for MNC?
That's a really good question, actually, because they have the role of a CEO in a startup, I think, is very difficult, whether it's a services business or an MNC where you've got a different concern about revenue and profit and delivery. And having been the CEO of a services business, the pressure is very different because of the pressure to deliver sales and service over really the pressure to deliver value as a startup. And I think they are different. The CEO of you may have a comment on this as well. The CEO of an MNC or or a public company or even a private services company is a different kind of person to the kind of person that's running a startup. Because I think culturally you're aiming to deliver different types of operational excellence with a different accountability and with a different type of investor. I think investors in MNCs are looking for a very different return to and have a different time horizon to the time horizon that you have as a startup in biotech. So I think they are very distinctly different types of people. That's why I would never want to be CEO of an IPO or a listed company. Yeah, terrible job.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to bring this to a close, but I believe, Andrew, you have a very interesting offer to the participants tonight. You want to just share that?
Yeah, we're very happy. Anybody who'd like to come and visit us at Medisix, we'd be very keen to host you, and probably as a small group. You can meet the leadership team. You can ask them the same question that you just asked me and see what their answer is and how close we are and aligned we are. So you're going to do something to enable that to happen. You know, we probably have to limit the number because there are more people here than there are in the company, and the size of the lab is a bit smaller than you could expect. But very happy for you to see that.
Yeah, we'll help take names after this, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Love to do that, yeah.
You'll be comfortable with how many at any given moment? 20 max?
Oh, I think probably 10.
10?
Max, yeah.
Okay.
10 at a time, yeah.
So Desiree will give you more details. I'm going to bring this to an end. I thank everyone for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
And please don't go home. Hang around, talk to each other, have some food and drink. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Desiree?
So a big round of applause for Andrew and Dree. Thank you very much. Before we break for networking, if I could just get a moment, if I could just get you to scan the QR code, not really just only for your feedback on how to make events better, but please contribute ideas on what you'd like to see. Our role here is to build a community for you. So let us know you want to do events with us. Tell us feedback, what sort of topics. It doesn't have to be biotech. It could be food tech, agri-tech. You know, we welcome everyone here. So please share with us how we can make our events better and serve our community, because that's what it's about. Maybe just adding on, there will also flash up later a QR code to register your interest to RSVP for the Medisix tour. And also just a shout out, we have 2 events running next week on the 19th of January with Nobel laureates. One event's on SDGs and bioethics, and the second one is with the Celexa founder who did genome sequencing and the data revolution. So please join us for those events. And if not, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you. And a final round of applause for Andrew and Dree. Invite everyone, there's wine and some nibbles at the back. Please help yourselves. And yeah, sorry, these are the events here. This will be on rolling slides anyway, so you can scan, register for the events and the Medisix. So, okay.
That's next week.
Yeah, that's for next week. Okay, thank you. Can I take a photo?